Hello, everybody, and welcome virtually to Madison Street Books. We are very excited about the event tonight, but first things first, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you've never used Crowdcast before, there's a couple of things you need to be aware of. First is the chat on the right-hand side. That's where you can chime in with any comments or anything like that. If you have a more formal question, you'll see down at the bottom of your screen, down below the three of us, soon to be two of us, there's a little button that says Ask a Question. You can see it already has a little one next to it. That is where you can ask kind of a more formal question if you have one. Both of these authors and their books are you can buy them on our website or from your local bookstore or however it is that you get your books. So, without any further ado, we are joined tonight by Sylvie Perry, which is a pseudonym, mysterious, for a Chicagoland-based psychotherapist. One of her professional focuses is in counseling the survivors of narcissistic manipulation. She has a master's in English. She previously wrote in a different genre under a different pseudonym, which is double mysterious. The Hawthorne School, which you can see right here, is her first psychological suspense novel, and we are excited to have with her Lucy Burdette, who is also there's probably a distinction between these two, but Lucy Burdette is a clinical psychologist and is the author of the popular Key West food critic mystery series, including the latest, A Scone of Contention, which I do not have with me, but we do have available in the store. Lucy's first novel of suspense is called Unsafe Haven, and will be published by Severn House. And without any further ado, I will turn it over to them. Thank you all so much for being here, and enjoy the conversation.
Okay.
Thank you, James, for that one.
Uh-oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just said thank you to James for that great introduction, and I wanted to just give you the chance to correct that because your book is already out, Unsafe Haven.
It's out today, same as yours.
Oh wow!
Yesterday, yeah, December 7th, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So yeah, we have lots of things in common. Turns out, the psychological background, the first thriller novel of suspense. So this should be fun.
This should be a lot of fun. So we're two psychotherapists who write novels. Yeah, and the bio actually says I'm a psychotherapist and I have a master's in English, which is true, but I do also have a master's in counseling. So
okay.
That's I'm not just out there counseling without a degree.
Okay. So I want to start with your book. That's why we're here, is your book. And first of all, tell us in a thumbnail. Not everybody will know what the book is about. So tell us that in a couple sentences.
Well, the story is about a mother called Claudia and her little boy, Henry, who's 4 years old. And she's a young mom without support, very insecure, really trying to do the best she can. And her little boy is quite challenging and has such behavior problems that the preschools are ready to throw him out. And then she happens upon this wonderful, progressive, Scandinavian-style forest school that is housed on acres of land, and they have focus on playing outside and art and music. And she's so excited. And all she has to do is do some volunteer work, and they're happy to let her in because they really see something special in Henry. That was more than a couple of sentences, or at least that was some very long sentences. But that's basically how it begins. And you might imagine that it could possibly be too good to be true.
Yes. We all thought that before she did, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So one thing that I was curious about right away is where the idea started and how long it's been percolating.
So the idea started, I think, when I had a chance to visit a Waldorf school, and I really thought it was fantastic. And it's the actual Waldorf school I visited, I think, is a very positive, wonderful place. Nothing strange going on there. No, but it was just so perfect and so idealistic and so wonderful. And I thought a lot about it. It just ignites the imagination, the whole Waldorf system. And then I was thinking about Scandinavian forest schools where the children really are outside and they learn themselves by interacting with nature. What great ideas they were. And then I thought, now, if you wanted to make a psychological suspense story, how could you put a sinister overlay on that? How could you turn that into something that would give the thrills and the chills? And that's how the idea started.
And has it been a while that you've been thinking about it? I was saying before we chatted that my new book took me at least 10 years to come together. So I'm interested in what your timeline was like.
Yeah. And Lucy, I find that so encouraging too, that it could take 10 years. And I think every book has to take as long as it takes, right?
Right.
And there's some that will come together, it just comes. And then there are others that, yeah, you need time to marinate it. You need time to make time to edit it, time to keep on reworking it. And I think, that could be perhaps a book in my future. But this one, no, it came together pretty quickly. It was the beginning of it came pretty much all in one big piece. And then it was working on it after that. It took a little bit of time. So it didn't really, it wasn't a long road.
Well, that's lucky. And I don't wish you 10 years. But
during your 10 years, you were working on other books as well.
That's right. I was working on other things, and then I would get some feedback and feel discouraged and say, oh, set that aside. So if you have a contract with a due date, that makes the road a lot more clear, or it has me.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm interested because when people ask me, how did you get from being a psychologist? And I don't practice anymore, but you still do. So they ask me, well, how has that influenced writing, or how did that lead to writing, or do they fit together? And to me, they fit together really well because you know people, what makes people tick. And also in detective fiction, if you go into a detective's office with a problem, that's where they start, and then they begin gathering clues and gradually unraveling the real truth. And it seems like it's very similar in a book, a mystery or a suspense. So I'm curious about how you feel those two kinds of work fit together.
Oh, that is so interesting. Yeah, about how the whole picture reveals itself bit by bit, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that they're very related. And I think that there are a few novelists who are also psychotherapists, and it makes sense to me because it's all about the story, isn't it? And I think that people who are interested in people, and as you say, what makes people tick, and what's underneath, what are the nuances, and what are the feelings, and what are the relationships, and all the dynamics in the family or within the person themselves. When you have that kind of fascination, it's very easy to also, create those stories in novels. It's not easy to create the stories in novels, but it's easy to make the transition from writing to psychotherapy, back and forth from one to the other.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And do your clients know that you write?
I don't talk about it with clients because I don't want to distract them, and I try to keep the focus on them and their lives and not be talking about myself unless there's a reason to, for their sake, not for my sake. So if I have a client who wants to be a writer or who is a creative person but is kind of blocked in their creativity, that would be a reason that I would bring it up. But I don't, I don't make it something that all my clients know.
And they don't need to worry about whether you're taking their stories to use.
Yeah, of course. And which, of course, we would never do. That would not be ethical, and we would never take anything from a client, of course.
Right.
But I could see, how a client might wonder, are you going to write about me? But no.
Yes.
No, generally, who do we write about? We write about ourselves.
Ourselves and anyone else around us is fair game too, right?
Yes.
Well, I know I'm always listening, and even if I go to the dog park, I'm listening to the conversations and how people interact with their dogs, and that'll go right in a book. So everything's fair game except for the people that you're working with, because you're doing it for them.
Right.
Yeah. So you say that this particularly came out of your interest in working with people who had narcissistic family members. So will you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So this book is a psychological suspense book, and it can be read, and probably will be read by almost everybody, as strictly that, just, the entertainment, that immersive experience that you get when you plunge into a novel. I hope that's what it will be. That's what I was driving at. I was hoping that it would be that kind of immersive experience for people. But for somebody who has been through a narcissistic relationship, it might be clear to them that it's also an allegory for a narcissistic abuse situation, which is the same dynamic that you would see in a cult with a cult leader, because cult leaders tend to be narcissists also. And narcissistic dynamics are everywhere, actually. They're in families. They can be in the workplace. You could have a narcissistic boss. And so a lot of the things that happen in this novel are based on things that actually really do happen in real life to people who are in this kind of dynamic. For example, Claudia, our main character, is in what we would, in psychology, we would call it a trauma bond, which is that she is addicted to the very thing that she needs to get away from. So that can happen with a narcissistic relationship. And sometimes somebody on the outside watching these two individuals interacting would wonder, why doesn't she just leave? It doesn't make any sense. And what they don't understand is that when you're in it, you are under sort of a hypnosis and sort of a bamboozled, and there is an addiction going on there. So I tried to represent that in the novel. Also, the narcissist will have what we call the flying monkeys, that she has enablers. She has people around her that she uses to keep other people under control. And the gaslighting, another technique that the narcissist can use. You'll see that also in the novel, where the character could be told that she can't trust her own senses. She can't trust what she thinks she saw. It didn't really happen. And to someone, again, outside the relationship, it looks unbelievable that somebody would be swept away like that. But it can happen. And it happens to a lot of people.
And would there be a way that people could notice this, or things that they could look for in their own lives?
Well, yeah, that's one thing when I'm working with people who have come through a narcissistic experience and they're coming out of it, getting away from a person who abused them, they want to know, what are the red flags so I don't fall into it again? And that's so difficult because the narcissist does not come with a Post-it note on their head saying, hello, I'm a narcissist. Usually they're charming, they mirror you, and they present themselves as everything that you would want, and also the solution to all your problems. And so you can see how that happened also.
Yes. So it might have something to do with how she was starting to feel. She was starting to feel things were wrong, but the pull towards the cult was even stronger.
That's such a good point, Lucy. And I think, one thing that we all need to learn to do is to trust that gut instinct more, and that intuition. A lot of times we'll ignore it for whatever kind of reason it might be, whether it's wishful thinking or just not trusting ourselves, thinking other people must know more than we do. Especially very young women will have that particular difficulty. So I think if we can learn to trust our own intuition about people and situations, that will usually, if not always, get us on the right track.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And she had reason not to trust because the father of her son turned out not to be a reliable person. I'm having trouble remembering now about her father. I know her mother was a very strong figure, an important relationship, but tell us about the character's father.
He was not in the picture, so she had never known him. So, she really is a person without any support. And of course, we know that cult leaders, for example, or cult members who would be the flying monkeys, the cult recruiters, they're looking for somebody who is insecure or who doesn't have any support. And that's the target. They're looking for somebody like that.
To be cut out of the pack. And yeah. A question that stuck with me all the way through is you wrote some other novels in another name that were very different. I love those. I love both of them, but they were different. They were more upbeat, not scary.
Yeah.
There was the element of tarot was in there, but not in a spooky way. So how did you feel about switching, and had you wanted to change tracks?
Yeah, I could actually show those. I just happen to have them right here. So here is the Hawthorne School, the one we've been talking about, by Sylvie Perry. But the other ones are written under a different pen name. If you go to my website, you'll see that. I don't know if you can see that very well, but Keziah Frost is the pen name. These are the two previous books. First one was The Reluctant Fortune Teller, about a 73-year-old man who is down on his luck, and he begins to read cards in a cafe to make some money, and that leads him to a lot of self-discovery and a whole drama. And then this was the sequel, Getting Rid of Mabel, and continues in the same world. There's one character finds that suddenly there is somebody who's come to town who is her doppelganger. And now she has a problem because this double is acting in a way she would never act. And she doesn't want people to mistake her for this scandalous person. And so, as you said, Lucy, it's lighthearted, and it's what they call uplit. So it's supposed to elevate your mood and make you feel better. And I think these kinds of books, the psychological suspense that you and I have now embarked on, also, in a way, I think they can make you feel better. Strangely enough, and that's something that we could talk about. Why? And I could even ask you the question. We could both try to answer it. why do people enjoy reading about a character in a terrifying situation, a desperate character, a character where the evil forces are closing in? These books are dear to our hearts. They're dear to my heart. I have a lot of very favorite books that are exactly about that. But why? Why would we want to read dark?
Right. And I usually don't read dark. Especially over the last 2 years with the stress of the pandemic, I was reading romance and cozy mystery and things that I knew were going to turn out well in the end. I don't mind if people go through some trauma, but make sure there's a happy ending there.
Yeah.
And I don't really like to be scared. If there's a scary movie or a violent movie, everybody knows not to take me to that. So I don't know if I can answer that question, whether is it the rush of being in the scary situation, or is it the relief at, oof, that's not my life? I don't know. What's your theory?
I think, whoosh, that's not my life is one part of it. And maybe it's also sort of getting into that dream of, what if something really terrible happened? How would I get out of it? And then you're watching the character to see, how does she get out of it? How does she get her way to safety, make her way to safety? And I think we're fascinated by bad things that could happen because we want to be able to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons that I love writing mystery, and people I think love to read it, is that they count on the world being set right in the end. And there's so much about the world right now that can never be set right and is so distressing, and we just have to sit with it and hold it. But if you read a book that has an ending that wraps up the bad things and the right people get punished, then it can be very reassuring and satisfying.
Yeah. That's the fascination of mystery.
My new book, which I have here right next to yours.
Yes, please show. And I absolutely love this book, as I was telling you a little bit earlier before we started today. Yes, Unsafe Haven. I love that book. I find, talk about an immersive experience. I feel totally immersed. This is a protagonist. Well, there's a couple of main characters, aren't there? But the young girl, you just really want to know, what is her world? What is her world? And what choices is she going to make? And like Claudia in my book, your character, Addison, the reader can see that she's trusting the wrong people. Oh, no. Yeah.
And I remember I was looking back at my notes. The first one was probably 2009, so it's even really more than 10 years. And I was starting to get interested in stories about new mothers who had not just given their children up for adoption, but had left them places. So there was a story, I live in Key West half the year, of somebody who left a baby, a newborn, in the Hilton bathroom, and a story of somebody who left their baby in a creche in a manger scene. And it just was so interesting to me to think about, having gone through the pregnancy and the birth, what would drive you to make a decision like that? And why weren't there other decisions that would have been better for you and the child? So those are the little data points that I was collecting before I started. But I think for me, and I think this is true for you, having read several of your books, is that the most interesting thing is the characters, is figuring out what makes them take the paths that they take and make the choices that they take. And
I agree Yeah.
Your suspense, and I don't know if this is true of all suspense in your Gothic world. It's all told from one point of view. Did you ever think about telling it from another person too, or did it have to be in her voice the whole time, Claudia?
Oh, let's see. Was there a point where we were thinking? Yes, actually, that was taken out in the edits. I did actually have one of the teachers keeping a diary so that the reader would be even more aware of things that were going on in the school and what the plan was. And in the edits that came out, the thinking was that it might give too much away, so it would be better to not have that point of view. So, so we came down to the one point of view, and I'm glad we did. I think that was a good choice. Yeah, I think it's good to have it just from Sylvie's just from Claudia's because because yeah, you are very limited in what you can understand about the school, although you have more of a clue than she does because she's desperate, because she's grieving the loss of her mother and feeling completely incapable of coping. So she's really a prime victim of a situation like this. So the reader can, look at her and think, oh my gosh, her inexperience is really going to get her in trouble here.
And even if you're seeing things through her eyes, but she's not computing the way the reader is, that something is going very wrong here.
Yeah. And haven't we all done that? I mean, we all have done that at some point, especially when we're very young, but it could happen at any age where we have our wishful thinking and we have our denial. We have all these things that can get in the way where we choose the exactly wrong path because either we refuse to see, we can't afford to see.
You wanted it so much, which is true in her case. She wanted this great school for her son so badly.
Yeah. Because it's so perfect. And that is really how the narcissist presents themselves, as too good to be true, just too perfect, too wonderful. And the narcissist just is such a fan of yours immediately. So that's kind of what she experiences going into the school. Yeah.
So Claudia is working as a masseuse, at least through part of the book. So I was interested in that as a choice and how you thought about that.
She is a massage therapist, and that's, you have to pick a job that you know something about, unless you can really research it and go find people who do that job. And I actually have a daughter who is a massage therapist. So it was easy for me to figure out, okay, she wouldn't have to work that many hours because usually massage therapists don't work a lot of hours because they don't work, I shouldn't say that, but they don't work 40 hours. They don't work 60 hours because it's just too hard on the body.
It's physically very hard work.
Very hard work. So it would make sense that she would be working maybe 20 hours a week, and then she'd have time to work at the school. So that's,
I was thinking another reason why it worked is you don't have relationships with your clients in the same way that you do as a therapist, because you're not talking to them face to face. They're working on you. It's about you, the customer.
Yeah.
So it's another way that she could be isolated.
Exactly. Yeah. When she's with the clients, they are mainly focused on themselves, their aches and pains, and how they want to feel better. And she's not going to be able to talk about what's going on with her. If she had somebody to talk to, she might have made different choices.
It might have helped, yeah, depending on whether she could listen
Yeah.
to it or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you see as what you're going to write next? Are you working on something now?
Yeah, and I'm very superstitious about talking about whatever I'm working on, because I feel like, and some others have said this before too, that if you talk about it, you might dissipate all your emotional energy for it. You might get the message to your subconscious, oh, you've already told that story, so you don't need to write it. So I kind of keep it under wraps.
Interesting, because I'm the opposite. The more feedback I can get, the faster I can write.
So what are you writing now?
So I have one more Key West, that the 12th book in the series, which takes place in Key West, and the main character is a food critic. That book is coming out in August, A Dish to Die For.
I love the titles. They're so funny.
I know, they're so silly. The one after that, which would be coming out the next summer, is the one I'm working on. I have about 20 pages, so not very far into it. But it's fun because the last book that just came out in August, A Scone of Contention, my characters went to Scotland, and they met along the process of solving the mystery. They met two Scottish ladies that were very sad because of a murder, but they were also I could see they had a lot of fun life in them. So they're coming to Key West in this book that I'm starting, which is totally fun. They're good characters. So it's nice to have something you're looking forward to writing.
Yeah. And maybe we could talk a little bit about what that's like. What is it like for you as you're composing a book? Do you find it to be grueling hard work, or do you find it to be relaxing, or do you find it to be stimulating, or what is it like?
Grueling hard work.
Really?
I have two friends that I'm in a writers group with and have been for 20 years. And so they read along with me as I'm writing, and as I do with them. So
Nice.
it's really helpful they know the characters, they know the stories, and they can say, well, this doesn't really fit, or what if this happened, and what if that happened, and that gets my brain unstuck. So I really like interacting with people about it. But it sounds like your process is different.
Yeah, I'm all on my own. I would love to have a writers group. Actually, I started with a writers group just before I wrote The Reluctant Fortune Teller, and it was great. It was really very nice. But I found that it was such a big group, and it would be nice to have just a small group. I think a lot more would get done. It would be a better use of everyone's time if it was just a smaller group. Yeah. And I have not found that, but I could see how that would be very valuable. Yeah, I do have beta readers, though. As I write, I'll have people read. Sometimes I write while it's in process.
Well, so tell people what beta readers are.
Oh, yeah, beta readers are people who will read, just friends of yours, or people who like writing and are willing to read. They read your manuscript and they give you feedback and say, I have questions about this or that, or I feel like you're losing the thread of this character, or whatever they might say. They might say, you have a vegetable growing this time of year and it actually doesn't grow that time of year, or any kind of practical thing like that. And it's really good to have people with different interests and backgrounds read it and catch anything that isn't quite right in the early drafts. That's what I do before I read it over for the last time, but it's not really the last time, but it's the last time before I send it to my agent. And then my agent, who is Danielle Bukowski, at Sterling Lord Literaristic. She is a very editorial kind of agent, so she does a great job reading it over, and we make changes together. And then when it's as good as we can get it, then she sends it out on submission at that point. And then, of course, if the book is bought, then we go through edits again. So it's been through a lot of work before it gets into the reader's hands.
And do you like the editing process?
I prefer the composition process. How about you?
Other way. I love to edit. To me, getting the whole story out in the first place is the hardest part. And then being able to go back and read through it and see, wait a minute, you missed an opportunity here, or this doesn't make sense, or that's not what that character would do. It's the Key West books are fun because I take a lot of real life and put it into the books. So they're actually even real people, and it's a very quirky place. So there are parades, and there are it's just an unusual town. So I borrow liberally. Whereas yours now, is the Hawthorne School based on a real place?
Well, it's kind of like that Waldorf school that I visited. And then it's also like the university that I went to, which was Dominican University in River Forest, Illinois. And the campus there is really beautiful. It was built in 1923, I believe, and it's Gothic style. And it is very, very beautiful. To me, it's beautiful. And I loved that place. I moved out from Ohio to go there, so I actually lived on campus. And it has the underground tunnels that connects one building to another, as in the Hawthorne School, the underground tunnels. And it's actually a wonderful place. It was a formative place in my life. It's all positive. There's nothing bad about it at all. But I just turned it sinister. You know, I put these two wonderful places together and put a sinister overlay on them. Yeah.
So do you think you will write more suspense, or you're not pinning yourself down?
Well, that's a big question, because I've got ideas for all different kinds of books. Yeah. And so I've got an idea for a psychological suspense. And like you know, when you talked about during the pandemic, Lucy, and you didn't want to, be looking at something so dark. Although our books, actually, they're not, when it comes to dark, they're really not that dark.
It's a lot darker than this.
They're not terrifying books. They're not grotesque or gross, or this is not horror. This is, it's just looking at
the dark side of some.
Looking at the dark. Yeah. But the idea that I have for another book is almost, I don't know if I'm in a state of mind to write it right now. So I've got that sitting there on one burner. And then I've got a couple of ideas for more uplit kind of books. I've got ideas that don't really fit anything. And I wonder sometimes, is that okay? Can I just write something that's not a genre? Can I just write something that doesn't, have to, fit a certain genre? But I have to say, I love psychological suspense. I probably read more of that than anything else. I love it. I really do. There's so much of it now, and there's so many good writers.
Yes, there are so many good writers.
Yeah.
In fact, in the whole mystery field, from cozy mysteries to thrillers, the writing is amazing.
Yeah.
It's not just people telling the same story in the same way.
Well, how about you? Are you going? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I bet your agent is good at helping you figure out what's next.
She's wonderful. She's absolutely amazing. Really.
Okay, I'm trying to look at
I wanted
questions.
to ask you, Lucy, are you going to write another psychological suspense?
I don't know. I have, like you, little bits of ideas. I have a little bit of an idea. I feel like I should use my psychology background. I like having psychologists in my books, even if the character, I've written 3 different cozy mystery series, and one of them, the main character was a psychologist, and I loved writing her, but they didn't sell as well, so they weren't continued. But in the Key West books, I have psychologists in there as friends or as, consultations. So I would love, I think, to go back to writing one about a psychologist who's in trouble and has to figure out what's happened to her life. I was looking at some notes. In fact, before I even had read your book, something about a narcissistic mother. They're just such good material there.
Well, yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of times I'm thinking you can't make this stuff up.
No. So there's a question here from somebody who's listening, from Joe. What led you to wanting to write these stories, because they diverge so much from your past work?
What led you to write these stories? Because they diverge so much.
So
I can't see the question from Joe, so I was a little distracted. Like, why can't I see it? I think just you want to write the kind of books that you like to read. And I think these are the 2 things that I like. I like humor and I like psychological suspense. I think maybe what they have in common is that element of surprise. With humor, you laugh because you're surprised. You weren't expecting that. And a psychological suspense, you're surprised. And you keep reading out of curiosity. What's going to happen next? What could possibly happen next? How's this going to unfold? Yeah.
Do you think your readers of the Uplit are going to follow you to this book?
Do you think they will?
I know with mine, I have big fans of my cozy mystery series, and I feel like I have to keep telling them, this is not a cozy mystery. This is darker. So don't go into it. I write a lot about food. The people in this book are not eating. They're not exchanging recipes.
No.
I have felt like I've had to really warn people, because some people don't want to read dark and others read a wider range.
Yeah. No, that'll be interesting to see. I hope that they do. We'll see what comes. But I think a lot of people, a lot of readers are also readers like me, where they just they enjoy various genres, and so that's something I'm curious about. See how it works.
See how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you too, Lucy. What about favorite authors? Who are your favorite authors? Do you have some like old classics or current ones? Or
yes, I should mention Jungle Red Writers, because you'll be our guest next week.
Thank you for that. Yes,
and it's a blog with 7 of us women crime fiction writers, all kinds of genres. So we have Reese Bowen, who writes historical mysteries and also bigger historical thrillers, and Hank, who writes definitely suspense, domestic suspense, and Hallie Efron also. And then Jen McKinley writes all kinds of things. She writes mystery, she writes romance, she writes rom-com. So she does it all. She could be your role model. She also writes faster than I would ever dream of being able to write. And Julie,
all with one name.
yeah. Julia Spencer Fleming, who writes traditional mysteries, and Deborah Crombie, who writes English police procedures. I hope I'm not forgetting somebody, but anyway, it's a fabulous group of writers. They're all good writers, and I'm their biggest fan. So we all just wait for the next one by one of them. I read just recently Barbara Ross, who writes the main clam bake mystery series. She has a new series that she started. Jane Darrowfield, who is her character is an older woman. Not most of the cozies, the characters are young women like Claudia or like Addie and Elizabeth, but this one is a little older, so it's interesting to read about her. And then another favorite is Barbara O'Neill, who writes. She started out with romance and now is more women's fiction. And her most recent one is called Write My Name Across the Sky. I think that's what it is. Write My Name Across the Sky. I love her writing. So how about you? What are you reading?
Oh, right now I'm reading The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. I'm kind of a Bronte nerd. I love the Bronte siblings, all of them, and I love biographies about them. I just cannot get enough of Charlotte and Emily, and Anne is a little harder to, she's a little bit less engaging to read, but I do love the Brontes. And Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, I think that's a great book. Daphne du Maurier. I love Daphne du Maurier.
She's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I was really hoping and trying for that kind of vibe. Daphne du Maurier, The Scapegoat, Rebecca, My Cousin Rachel. Yeah, those are great ones. So I find myself going back to classics a lot, as well as reading all the great psychological suspense books that come out. Well, I don't read them all, but reading a lot of them.
Yeah. So you feel like you can read while you're writing? Because yes. I know some people don't want to read anything similar to what they're writing for fear it will influence them.
Yes, I think so. Although there are times when I'm so absorbed with the writing and it's taking so much of my time that I feel I don't have time to read. When I'm in that sort of fevered pitch and I'm writing 2,000 words a day and I'm also working full time, then I don't have time to read. But that's another thing we could talk about is our writer's routine too, because 2,000 words a day would be a really crazy good day, but typically
that would be an amazing day for me. Yeah.
Typically I'll write 1,000 or maybe I'll write 1,500, but it comes like in a big push in just a few months. Well, I'll write a lot. And then when that's passed and we're editing, then I can really get back into my reading again.
Uh-huh. And do you plan the stories ahead, or are you following the characters and see where they lead you?
I would love one day to write a book where I just have the character in an interesting situation and then just follow where it leads. I would love to do that. Really, I would love to do that. I think that would be such an adventure. I think I've been too much of a scaredy cat to do that. I do plan it out pretty much. What I do is I really get to know the character. I keep a notebook and I write all about the character, everything about their childhood, everything about what they like, what they know, what they dream of. I write a lot about the character and maybe about another character, possibly the villain or the antagonist. I will write about it. And then I have my situation. And then as I start writing, I'll see, okay, these are the things that need to happen. And this is what happens at the end. And this is how I get there. And then I just fill it in as I go. I make it sound really easy. I just fill it in as I go. It's not quite like that. But what I'd really love to do is just take off on a wild ride and not know where I'm going. I would love to do that. maybe next time.
Maybe. And yeah, each book is different. I feel like I started out, well, this is my 20th book. So I started out feeling like I had to write an outline because that's what everybody said you needed to do. And otherwise, how do you know what you're writing? And now, we have the same publisher now, Crooked Lane. They publish my Key West mysteries, and they don't ask for an outline. They don't ask for a synopsis, which I'm so relieved about because I don't have one. I would make something up, and then I would say to my husband, "Oh, I'm stuck. I'm stuck. I don't know what's happening here." And he would say, "What's in your synopsis?" And I would say, "There's nothing. There's nothing in my synopsis. I know how the book opened and I know how it closes," which is helpful because then you're shooting for something. Like a couple of weeks ago, I wrote the last 2 chapters for this book that's only 20 pages because I know where I want those characters to get. I know where I want them to arrive. So it's a weird way to do it, but I think it comes with more experience too, is trusting yourself. You will get there. And there's so much chance to revise.
Yeah. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking that's definitely what I want to do next time. I want to just start off like on a road trip and not know.
Although there are horror stories with that too, where people write themselves into a box and then end up having to throw out 100 or 150 pages, which would really just kill me because I don't write that fast.
Uh-huh.
So yeah,
so that's never happened to you?
No, it hasn't. But that's why I think having the writers group to check every couple of weeks and to ask to myself, am I going in the right direction? Or yeah. And the suspense or thriller, whatever it's being called, was hard because it was 4 points of view, which I've always only written one.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you know where to start? Who's the most important? When do you switch voices? And my agent is not really hands-on unless it's a new project. So there's one character, Rafe, that you will remember, and she just hated that guy's voice. So she wanted me to take that out. When it sold, the editor at Severn House wanted more of him back in. Just interesting. You have to listen to what's in your gut because you hear a million different points of view.
You really do. Yeah.
And so will you read your reviews and
the publisher has sent me some reviews that were printed. As far as, lately I've been really excited about some reviews that have come up on Instagram. And I've been just so pleased, just feeling like, oh, this is wonderful.
You really understood
yes,
what you were trying to do.
That's exactly it. You're sitting in a room by yourself writing this book and you're thinking, will anybody get this? Will anybody like it? Will anybody understand it? And then when you see people going, OMG, I was so worried about Claudia, or I totally understand how she felt. I felt that way too. Or, this was so twisty, or, whatever they say about it. It just makes me feel, so grateful that people are receiving it. And that
because
feeling.
you're spending so much time by yourself, just you and the computer, that when it gets sent out into the world, it's kind of a scary moment.
Yeah. I mean, this is your story that came up from your subconscious somehow, and it's a very it feels like a very private thing, and you're making it very public, and it's a little scary.
Well, we're almost out of time, but so what else have we not talked about your book that you'd like them to know?
Well, what would I like you to know about the book? I would like to say that I am very grateful to the publisher for getting such a beautiful cover. I love it. It really does look a lot like the college that I was talking about. I adore the cover, and I'm really feeling like I need to frame it and put it on the wall. Yes. Love it. And yeah, I hope that people will pick it up and enjoy it and have that sort of what we all want when we read a book, which is just to be entertained, to be immersed, and to just be, escaping for a little while.
And to get to the end and say, oh, I'm really sorry that that's finished, because
yeah.
I love being in that world. Isn't that a great feeling?
That is, yeah. That is a joy of reading. It really is. Yeah. Yes. And I hope that people will pick up Unsafe Haven by Lucy Burdette as well. That is really a wonderful book, and so honored to be talking to you, and you have been so helpful to me from the very beginning, from the reluctant fortune teller.
The thing about this world of writers is that's how people are, and they help you, and then you pay it forward, and it makes it so much less painful and lonely. And your books are delightful, so it's been my pleasure.
Oh, thank you. And so are yours.
Thank you. So everybody should come next week to jungleredwriters.com, and Sylvie will be there.
Yeah, because we interact. So the person who writes the post, then you can click on the comments where it says how many comments in red. You click on that, and it takes you to the page where the comments
There's a whole community over there. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, and you talk back and forth all day.
Yeah.
It's very nice.
And thank you so much to this bookstore, Madison Street Books, for hosting us.
Thank you, Madison Street Books.
Wait to get to Chicago to visit, but I'm not coming in the winter.
Fair enough.
Don't do that. No.
Thank you both so much for being here. I've put a link to purchase both of your books in the chat, and it's been a really lovely discussion hearing you both talk about craft and about the particular niche and genres that you all occupy, and it's really been a treat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks for
asking, Sylvie. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.